Hey everybody, today we are talking about The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He. The Ones We're Meant to Find is centered around two sisters, Casey and Celia. And Celia is the more carefree, loves the world around her, is outgoing, and everyone loves her, and she's very pretty. And then we have Casey, who is very much the opposite of Celia, where she's more introverted. She doesn't make friends easily. She tries to think more logically about things and doesn't really see why you'd want to be so carefree in the type of world that they live in. So the world that they live in is basically Earth, but it is decaying. It is already dying basically because of all of the pollution that people have put on it. And so because of this, they had to create some kind of a solution to try to save at least some of the people on Earth from getting these really bad diseases. And they started coming up with like really good solutions to like things like cancer, where they found cures, and the science was getting so advanced that they were actually able to start eradicating some of these like really big things that were killing off humans. But they also still had areas of the world that were getting hit by lots of disastrous things like hurricanes and megaquakes and things like that, where even though they were healthy, they were still dying from the natural disasters. And then there were also some pollution that was getting out from certain factories and companies and things that were actually letting out dangerous chemicals and things, infecting areas of the world like the water. And so what they did to try and protect people from this is they looked at everyone in a moral perspective and like what they had done and what their families had done while they were on Earth. And if they did lots of like humanitarian type things and were very resourceful, and like recycled a lot and took care of the Earth and put a lot of good into the world, then they would get higher rankings and they would be qualified to live in what they called an eco-city. And then eco-city is basically a floating city above Earth and sheltered off and very small. So your like home is basically like this stasis pod that you can go in and you can experience the world virtually. It kind of reminded me of like Ready Player One, where you like go into this world and you feel like you're actually there, but you're not actually there. So it kind of had some of that element to it. But they weren't just doing it to play like a game. They were doing it to save themselves from the state of how the Earth was, and to have more space for people to live in these eco-cities. They needed less space to live, so you have like a small house outside of your like stasis pod, so you don't have to live in your pod all the time. But there's like floors and levels, and the higher, or rather the less your rank is, so like if you're rank 1, then that means you're the top dog. If you're like rank 2000, you're like really low, and you might still be in the eco city. But if your number is like 20,000, you're probably not qualified in the eco city, and so you're probably living on Earth. And they have certain protections, like they call it like I think anti-skin or something like that, where you like put it on your body and it's supposed to protect any toxins from getting to you. And you wear like masks, and you just cover your whole self when you're down there. And people that live down there that can afford that, to use those things, they'll use it, or they'll still try to just stay in their house as much as possible so that they're not breathing in anything from the air outside, and they're not going in the water where they could be infected that way as well. So this is basically like a futuristic sci-fi fiction kind of a feel, which is not really what I thought it was going to be when I first started reading it. I mean, very quickly you find this out, and if you read the back of the book you'll know this too, or like the front leaf cover. But going into it blind, I just thought, it was a story about two girls and like their love of the ocean or something. But really what the ocean means in this story is a lot more significant than just somewhere that they live next to. So going back to the water specifically, Celia really loves the feel of it on her skin. So she likes to take off her anti-skin and all of her protections to swim in it. she took Casey down there one time, and Casey was like, you cannot be doing this. This is like not good for you. And she was like appalled that she would take off her anti-skin and go in there. And they tested it. They have like these toxic meter things to test. And supposedly the water was fine. So she's like, okay, fine, you can go in there. But she didn't want to go in there. And Celia just loved the feeling of being out of the Eco-City so much and being down there on Earth and in the water that she would often sneak out at night and go down there and swim a lot. And it turns out the water did have pollution in it, and it was starting to affect Celia and was starting to poison her, essentially. And Casey doesn't know any of this, like, right at the beginning, because the book actually it's actually in 2 parts. So sometimes it's Celia's point of view, or C's point of view is actually, she calls herself C in that book, and then she calls Casey K. And so Casey has her own part and C has her own part, and it goes back and forth. So we're learning bits and pieces of the story as we go, and it's not really in like the same exact time frame because Celia is missing. So in Casey's perspective, it tells us how she's like, her sister's been gone for a few months. But then when we get to C's part of the story, it's been like more than that she's been on like on this abandoned island, basically. And she's like, I have to find my way back to Kay. I have to find my way to her. I have to find my sister again and let her know that I'm okay. She must be so worried that I've been gone for so long. And so she's trying to like build a boat to get herself to be able to travel and find her way back to Kay. And when we are reading Kay's perspective, it's her trying to cope with the idea of Celia probably being dead because she's been missing for so long that she's like, I just have to assume that she's gone at this point. And she accepts it pretty easily because she's a logical person, and she doesn't really feel emotions the same way as others might. And so she's like, is it bad that I don't really feel very sad anymore about it? Like, I'm just being, it's just a fact, she's probably gone, and like, I'm just accepting it. And so there's that kind of dynamic between her and her sister and how different they are and how they deal with things. And but as we go through the story, we learn more and more about the different sides of the sisters and where their timelines start to kind of like get more close to the same time. There's a lot of discoveries in here that I did not see coming, that I did not think were going to happen. I was actually pleasantly surprised with how, with the direction of the story was going. And at first I wasn't sure how much I was going to get into it, but then the more I started understanding like the world and the terminology and vocabulary that it used to describe all of this like technology and these different things, like the more I started to want to find out how C was going to be able to get back to her sister and how long it was going to take. And there's like other characters too, but there's this other character that gets introduced partway through the book for C that is like a big deal in her deciding what she's gonna do about finding her sister. And Casey also meets someone who is also a pretty big deal for how she's going to move on, because there are decisions she has to make on whether she's going to help save the world or not, like big scale level decisions, because the world is still like getting worse and worse, and eco-cities only have so much space for people to live. And so there's this decision like, how are we going to save the rest of the people that aren't up here with us, and like, are we just going to abandon them and give up on them? And so there's also that like kind of world crisis side of the story too. That's what Casey has to deal with, whereas C is like, I just have to try to continue to survive. And every single time she's close to finding C, or close to finding K, something happens to like pull her back, and then she has to kind of like start over. And those reasons you'll find out if you have either read the book or if you do decide to read the book. But if you like futuristic kinds of stories and like stories with like twists, because I would definitely say the ending is kind of, like I said earlier, it's not something that I was expecting, not something that I really thought was gonna be the case. And then I was like, okay, yeah, this, and it actually really works for the story. And like, and then there's also like mini twists within the big twist. There's like also other things that you're like, ah, that makes sense. Yes, that makes sense. And then there's other things where I'm like, yeah, I never would have even guessed that at all. Yeah, and so that's what I think is enjoyable in a book, is if you can feel that way, where like sometimes you can like guess what's going to happen and you're right, and sometimes you have no idea what's going to happen and you're pleasantly surprised with what happens. I will say the ending, I did not think that it was going to end the way it did, and I think it was actually a good way for it to end. I think anything after that would probably have just been like considered fluff that was like not really needed. But I was thinking that we were gonna get more, and I like turned the page and it's like acknowledgments, and I was like, wait, what? Like that's actually how it's gonna end. And so like I flipped back and like reread the last page again, and I'm like, okay, well, how would they have been able to build on this anymore? Like it actually seems like this is where it should end. So props for that. But yeah, thank you so much for watching my thoughts, and let me know if you read it and what you feel about it. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.